Okay, I'll try and keep within 10 minutes. So we haven't really talked about BQ much, but I think if the people who were here yesterday will have seen Lena's demo to give you some idea of it. But it's a project trying to make sense out of biodiversity data that's coming in very wide range of different sources. So all different sorts of methodologies, and each of those methodologies has a different sensitivity to the organisms that it can detect, and all of those organisms have different detectabilities within those methodologies. And somehow we need to try and make some sense of this to understand change in biodiversity, to model future scenarios, and give information to policymakers on that. I will go as quickly as I can do it. I particularly want to talk about GBIF because it's kind of interesting hearing all this discussion about data space, because GBIF doesn't call itself a data space. I don't think they even think they're a data space, and yet they clearly are a data space. They contain 3 billion observations of biodiversity from all over the world, almost 115,000 different data sets on there, 2,500 different institutions, but within those institutions there's a whole bunch of different people who effectively own those data sets and share them openly. And every single day there are at least 6 publications published based on GBIF mediated data through all of those people sharing data. So just to give you some examples of why GBIF is a data space, it's federated. It uses something called the IPT, the Integrated Publishing Toolkit, that hosts either nodes within GBIF or institutions like my own have, and use to publish their data to GBIF. It uses open standards, not standards created by themselves. You always see this as people saying, we have a new standard, but it's not basically some people saying it's a standard. These are actually standards created by external bodies controlled by the community as well. It uses digital object identifiers to identify individual data sets, and it uses to identify individual downloads, and it has very clear licensing. So GBIF started in 2001. Up until 2016, it had no clear licensing. It had a slot where people put licensing in, but it was the Wild West, and quite often people didn't put a license in then, so you had no idea whether you could use the data or not. That was realized as just being completely unworkable, and so they've reduced it down for the last 10 years to just 3 open licenses. Having 100,000 different data sets, trying to make it open and reusable or other, there's no point trying to do any negotiations for licenses. It's impossible to go to all of those people and take tiny little 1 record from here, 100 records from there, to be able to do the analysis you want to do. If you're trying to do this in the biodiversity world, there's just too many people involved, and couldn't have anyone deciding what their licenses are. Another very important factor about using Creative Commons licenses is you can't revoke them. So you can't have people creating reproducible workflows, having people then revoke that license afterwards, and then screwing your reproducibility up and your reproducibility. And they will have metadata associated with them, so you can find exactly what we're looking for. You can understand how those data sets were created. So it's all findable, it's all accessible, all interoperable, and all reusable. But it's only a certain subset of particularly important biodiversity kind of data, biodiversity observations. There are 44 countries that are full members with voting rights. For every $1 invested into GBIF, the direct benefits are about $3 coming back, and there are about $12 in indirect benefits. And I really don't understand why every country in the world isn't a member of this, because it's incredibly cheap. We did a bit of research with users of biodiversity data to see how they access the data. It was quite clear that users actually want all modes of access. So they want to be able to download data, they want to be able to connect to an API for repeated access to the data, and they also want to browse data. So GBIF allows people to do all those three, and I think any data space should be able to allow people to do that, because you need it for different things, but same users need all three. And of course, it integrates with lots of other things. People use GBIF data for all sorts of things in marine world, as well as citizen science, any kind of thing you imagine. So GBIF is a mature, it's 25 years old now, federated biodiversity data space with clear governance, global interoperability, fair compliance, and integrated capacity. So where does BCube come in? Well, GBIF is a member of the BCube consortium, and we're trying to make it better, trying to make the processing of GBIF data better to inform policy. We make data cubes out of raw GBIF data to try and simplify the analysis. If you know biodiversity data is incredibly heterogeneous, all these different methods, all these different people involved mean that it's very difficult to put these data together, and we need workflows to be able to make indicators or models to do this repeatedly as well. So we make cubes with the dimensions of taxonomy, space, and time, but we can also add additional dimensions into that as well. So it's occupancy data, it's the presence of a particular organism in a particular time and space cell at any one time. Don't deal with populations because counting organisms can be difficult. There was a talk yesterday in the Living Planet thing about counting elephants and cat space. You can do it, but it's not very accurate. But you can still do presence and absence of elephants in particular regions, and it's really useful for looking at the distribution of species, even if you don't know exactly their population. So we can cover large spatial extents, and you can, once you've gridded data, you can integrate it with lots of other environmental data, because all the other environmental data is all in grids as well. The one thing those remote sensing people across the road have not got is taxonomic scope and taxonomic resolution is what we've got. So we really need to integrate those two sides. We're the people who know how many organisms or species are there, and we can go right down to subspecies level with the data that we have. And we cover all known organisms. Actually, we also cover now unknown organisms, because not all organisms described. We know there are organisms through eDNA, but we haven't been able to describe them yet, and so we can still already start mapping those. This is what GBIF looks like. If you're a user wanting to do it manually, you can filter your data on the left-hand side, and you click on the download button to get the data. Before VCubed, you had the top three options to download raw data in different formats, but now you have the option to click on Cube, which, unlike the other one, aggregates data into cubes. You can also use the asynchronous API that we were mentioning before to download data. And of course, you do have to program in the wait while the data is extracted. But you're aggregating 3 billion records. It's remarkable that most of these queries take like 15 minutes to produce it. And so our cubes look like this. This one is for invasive species, giant knotweed. This is aggregated on a yearly basis. And you can see here, not the bottom one, but the one just above it. You've got a year, 2014. You've got the grid cell code for the European Environmental Agency grid. You've got a species key that links it to the species name in GBIF. And it says the N is the number of observations that say that cell was occupied. The minimum coordinate 30 was the smallest observation in there, or the smallest uncertainty circle within there that says that cell was occupied. So that second one from the bottom, we're really sure it's occupied, or 199 observations, and they were very accurate observations. The bottom one, we only have one observation that says that cell was occupied, and the minimum coordinate uncertainty is almost 3 kilometers, so you're really not sure. And we can use this to filter out the uncertain observations before we get to making models and vectors. So this is just an example of where we're integrating data cubes with environmental data. And I'm meant to be hurrying up. So, and another example of where we look at indicating change with time. Extremely difficult. It's very easy actually, but all of this has to be considered in terms of the biology of the organism. If you do look at change with time and you're talking about migratory species, or if you're talking about species that are very cryptic, or if you're talking about extremely rare species where there are a lot of false positive records, you have to know not just the nature of the biology of the organism, but also the nature of the methods used to identify that organism and detect that organism for the observation. So just as a caveat, you can't take the biology out of these indicators. So takeaway messages, yes, we really feel it's very important to integrate these biodiversity data with environmental data. Occupancy is really powerful, and integrating these data from all of the tens of thousands of data sets is also really important as well. And that's my contact details. I'll just say about GBIF that yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear, and I wonder if there aren't some lessons. So when you make closed data sets, that is the natural thing people tend to want to do, but perhaps people don't realize the IT overhead and the political overhead being closed, and was a big danger in that everyone in biodiversity would just be closed with their data and not cooperate. And there's still lots of closed data sets, but if we don't work together and do it openly, we have no chance of doing any of this stuff.